communication. We try to talk about the needs that were hurt and the emotions behind it. But how can we translate that into a model that you can then argue and you can take to military men or to political leaders or to business leaders to create structures of safety for people to be well? So this brought me into integrating all my background. So I spent a good 20 years trying to figure out how can I make sense of all this. So I integrated my background and my understanding of nonviolent communication. But I also drew from my background in dance anthropology, dance ethnology. And this is the daughter of Buckminster Fuller, Allegra Fuller Snyder. So I already had in my training, back in my 20s, this idea of culture and systems thinking and tensegrity and countertension and how a balanced system has pulls and tugs in order to create stability in the system. So I already had that as an understanding. That was then compiled on my training in Laban movement analysis, which is a system of movement description developed by a dance choreographer, one of the leaders of modern dance, Rudolf von Laban, who came out of Germany and out of actually Austrian-Hungarian Empire. And he created this system of thinking about body, effort, shape, and space as an integral, again, system, where if you change one part, you affect the whole. That is exactly a principle that leads to the question asked, at the beginning. What is the nature of my intervention? How do I intervene? What's the proper intervention? Okay. So that idea informed everything I did after this. This I, was trained in back in my 20s, all right? Then I was trained in mediation. And then I was teaching university courses to international students of conflict resolution and mediation at the graduate level. When I finally got so disheartened by not being able to have any impact back in 2005, and then the withdrawal from Gaza, and just how tragic the whole scene came, and the breakup of the Oslo Agreement, and just the violence that was happening, and it was heartbreaking. So I ended up leaving Israel, and I began to get engaged in what was called the Transition Network, which was a sustainability-based, community-based model for sustainable development. This is what I brought together with my teaching of culture and how it really rests, how it anchored in restorative justice practices, because I was teaching courses based on how do you build community. So that my favorite class was culture, conflict, and community development. What is the nexus of inner peace and outer peace? How do we think in terms of human scale to build from the micro to the macro? How do we work in groups, create circles so that we create a new sustainable future? How do we create the fractals that will lead us to a better future? And that's what the Transition Network was, and that's how I got engaged in that. And then on top of that, I was trained in somatic experiencing, which is this trauma healing tool technology that I was trained in, and then later another level of this work. And then I, in trying to figure out the model, grounded it in human needs theory. So only because I had this huge, I basically left because I can go basically in any university course, any place on a university, I can find my way home. I can be there and ask good questions, and I may not be an expert in any of the places, but I can certainly ask some questions that are interesting. So how can I make sense of this? I developed this heuristic model, and what it means by heuristic means it is a model that basically tries an imperfect model, but it says If it looks like a duck and quacks like a duck, it's probably a duck, but it's certainly an animal. Well, there used to be a time when we could count on that. And this is part of the current fear that we all have with AI and fake news and the disembodiment of our current reality. So this is an invitation to get back into being embodied. And the model is a call to embodied action. So we begin with the idea that we're trying to create a framework. I've created a framework that is a call for reflexive, to think reflexively, to understand how to work with this. We need to do, it's a reflexive model. That's what's, that's what's core to heuristic as a heuristic model. So it's a way to think about human needs. It recognizes that the needs support human survival. Again, we go back to the foundation of safety and danger. It also reveals, like every good system, that there's synergies and tensions between human needs. Just like there is in dance, like I'm being pulled on this diagonal, and that gives me stability. And if I move, then I have a lot of mobility. There's a tension, there's a dance, there's a movement between these synergies and tensions between human needs. And lastly, it's building upon the fact, all of us, everywhere on the planet, we've all been babies. We've all been babies, and we were babies, and we grew to the age of 3, basically the same way. Our wiring is basically the same. And there seems to be, and this gets really exciting about this model, and what's exciting because I'm finding it's robust. It's being supported by many of my colleagues who were psychiatrists and experts in developmental psychology, and that it does reveal a developmental relationship between human needs and emotions in a more coherent way than it just being general relationship between human needs and emotions. So let's look at Maslow and why Maslow didn't help me. Maslow was not helpful for the following reasons. While there may be on some level spiritual truth to that in our psychological development, our spiritual development, we go towards self-actualization. If you want to talk about conflict, if you want to solve people's suffering, it doesn't help. Why? Because people give up their life, their physiological needs for an idea. They'll kill for honor. They may even give up their well-being or they'll give up their belonging, their friendships, to improve their status. So there's ways in which people do not follow this hierarchy if you want to make sense of conflict. So that led me to looking at the needs theorists. So here's an overview of some of the leading thinkers in needs theory. So here's Maslow's hierarchy. Galtung is called the father of peace studies, and what he did had inspired the model because he grouped needs into groupings. These are some of the basic international conflict resolution people. Burton, Max Neef was an economist, a Chilean economist who came up with this principle of human scale development. So RJ, restorative justice, is right on the cusp of all the leading thinking that we must build community. We must work at the community level. And Max Neef was part of that movement when he looked at international development. And here's Rosenberg, which is beautiful, but again, it's not helpful when it comes to seeing how do the needs interact. So this is what I did. I introduced these 3 categories, which I call hungers: survival, love, power, and meaning. If you notice, none of these major thinkers use the word power. Now, we all know that there's systemic inequality. We all know there's power dynamics between people, but yet that was not mentioned anywhere. It was kind of mentioned indirectly through control, but that's different than power, being empowered. And I thought it was necessary to name that as a developmental category. It's also true when you look at development, and I'll show you in a minute. Well, actually, I'll show you more next week. But anyway, it is one of the developmental markers that happens in the first years of life. Then I did the following. I named esteem as a need and safety. So I have, Maslow's. Identity, recognition, belonging, and autonomy. To this, I anchored physical aliveness. We have physical aliveness as, let me see my pointer. How do I, physical aliveness. Oh no, I don't want to do that yet. Okay, I messed up. Sorry, guys. Everyone, I didn't want to do that yet. Physical aliveness, I brought in because physical aliveness is what we're talking about. It begins with embodied experience. And I wanted to bring people's conversation. When I was in track 2 or I've been in mediation, it's very hard to invite people to begin with their physicality, drop into the felt sense, start with yourself, start with your breath before you try to go into anybody else's, right? So I wanted to name physical aliveness in the model. Also because people kill and die for pleasure. There's a whole huge human tragedy for sexual abuse as one of the bounties of conflict, right? Of warfare. I mean, that's one of the histories of the Crusades. I mean, it's one of many ways that this desire for pleasure and physical aliveness plays itself out in the realm of tragedy and suffering. But it's certainly a need that we all have, this need for pleasure and avoidance of pain. The other one that was very important was to name fairness. And I put fairness rather than justice because fairness is part of an invitation to focus on relationship. If I ask people to talk about justice, justice often brings up a desire for revenge, to create an equivalence of pain, to go to getting in towards punishment. Justice may be towards, compensation and punishment. When you speak about fairness, it invites a more feelingful inquiry. It invites emotions. So people start dropping in to talk about what they're feeling, how they feel unfairly treated, and what needs to happen so that they don't feel unfair. What would heal that feeling of unfairness? You already soften the field, the boundaries get softer, and you already begin a process of moving towards repair. And this led me to this model, which is the human needs map. And it draws it on these 4 hungers and 8 needs. Each hunger is connected to 2 needs as a need pair. The hungers can be described as the hunger for a good and pleasurable feeling. One that we want to react to bad, uncomfortable, and painful feelings. So we react to the uncomfortable feelings. And we also respond to the pleasurable feelings. So we respond and we react in relationship to pleasure and pain. Each of these are very, very nuanced and different. So our response, our sense of pleasure, when we think of our survival, of being vital and in life, is a very different kind of quality than it is when we think of the pleasure and the pleasantness of feeling love and connection. It's a very different somatic sensation. Also, as we think or feel in terms of power and impact, when I feel my powerfulness, my vitality in terms of my muscularity and my ability to determination and clarity, it's very different than when I feel my hunger for meaning, for knowing my direction, knowing where I'm going, knowing who I belong with, knowing who I am. It's a very different sensation. So this hunger for survival, love, power, and meaning, to be in life, to feel connected, to have impact, and to have a life that has my values clearly defined. These are the four anchors that help organize the mind when we're looking at the dynamics in the field. So allow me now to break it down a bit further. Oh, and by the way, this little piece down here is the life force. We all begin with life force energy. As you know, I practiced Qigong and Tai Chi, and so you work with the Qi, you work with the life force, and as the life force rises up, it manifests in the body and in our lives. And so how it manifests, part of how it manifests is through these four hungers, and more specifically through the 8 needs. So we begin with survival. I feel the pleasure in my body, and I feel safe and secure. What's interesting, like in the Laban and the movement system, each of these 2 needs are both stand on their own needs, because the physical pleasure in my body is connected to feeding yourself, of having sexual intimacy, of having, sitting in the sun and enjoying the sun on your body. It's feeling good. Okay, it's on a very embodied physical space. Enjoying good tastes, good wine, good chocolate. But it's also in feeling safe and secure, feeling warm and secure and at ease, so I can digest my food. So this feeling of safety and physical aliveness is going to both play itself out by itself as stand-ons, alones, and in every other need. Okay, we'll sequence up to love. The need for belonging, to feel included and cared for, and the need to feel seen and considered. Now, why it's important to name the need and not just sit on love, I need connection, is that the hunger for a certain quality of feeling, which is captured by the term the hunger, is general. If I ask somebody, I want to feel connected, well, what does that mean? How do I translate that in a very specific satisfier? That requires going down to the level of the needs. So what's going to satisfy my need for belonging? What do I need to do? What do I need to ask of you in order to feel included and cared for? What specific actions do I need to get this experience of being included? If I can't name the request, it's really hard to decipher. It's so big, all the choices out there. Where do I go? You're feeling excluded? Well, how do I know what is it going to take to have the connection? Bringing it down to the needs level, I can begin the creative inquiry, the feelingful inquiry, to ask, what is it going to take for you to feel cared for and included? And in the same way, what is it going to take for you to feel seen and considered? It's different. It's very different quality. One strengthens the whole group. It's a group connection. The other one is about me. This is purely about me feeling seen and considered. It's not about you. It's not about being part of anything. It's about me being considered. my needs, my emotions. Okay. We're going to be revisiting this, more. So this is just the first introduction to this. Then we go to fairness and autonomy. Again, I want to be empowered, but what does that mean? I want to be empowered to have impact. It means that I want to have the capacity to have the free will to exert my will. I need the ability and the capacity to exert my will. And I want to make sure that I'm treated fairly. I want to be treated fairly, and I need, if I'm going to work and live in a society, in a community, I also need to be able to perceive what it means for other people to be treated fairly. So this is all part of the skillfulness of embodying this hunger. Okay. Then we go to the level of meaning. Okay. I want to know who I am and where I belong. Otherwise, I'm lost. I don't know who I am, what I belong to, how I belong to, and it's an existential crisis. The esteem need is I feel valued. I feel respected. I feel treated in a way where my integrity, my dignity is being reflected back, that I'm a person who has significance in the community. Okay. That may or may not be connected directly. I'll say it to you differently. Esteem and identity, like all the need pairs, work together, both as a synergy, but also they can be in conflict. So for example, my first wound, when people have asked me, what's your first traumatic experience, is being born female in my patriarchal, loving, beautiful family, but highly misogynistic, highly. I have to laugh because my mother would tell me she would never go to a female doctor. My father was a brain surgeon, right? So, it was such a beautifully patriarchal experience that it was crushing for me. It didn't matter how many PhDs or doctors or whatever, I could never be good enough because I was inherently different. I wasn't like my three older brothers. So this feeling of being valued and respected, there was no way I could gain that because my identity, who I was as a female, was a loser. So this conflict, inner conflict, has followed me throughout my life, right? This is one of many examples that all of us in different ways, shapes, or form experience. Because between these needs, there's both a tension and then there's a synergy between the needs. So I'm just introducing you the idea as the first impulse because we will be building on this as we go along, okay? This happens to be a picture of my children, my first grandson. I am a grandmother, so I have the authority of speaking as a grandma. So I am happy. I am fulfilled. My needs are satisfied. I feel joy. You see a smile. Smiles are non-verbal communication. They're both an expression of what's happening inside, but they're also communicable. Like all emotions, we look at it and it triggers our mirror neurons and we feel a certain way inside of us. That's the nature of the beast. That's the design of the human species. That's the design of the animal species. We are designed to look at nonverbal communication and respond to it. And the emotional expression is pre-wired until we learn as we get older to adapt it. But before we adapt it, it's pre-wired up to the age of around 3. Okay. So here's a little review. So the hungers are drives to feel a certain quality of pleasure and attain a particular state of being. That's sort of the academic definition. But in shorthand, we hunger for a good and pleasurable feeling and react to a bad and uncomfortable or painful feeling. My academic definition, because I've published in academic journals and I'll be writing a book and so forth. So I sort of need that academic, stamp of approval. Needs are human requirements that call for a response. That means we act on our needs, and they are part of our capacity to survive. Our needs are survival based. Our hungers are part of that system, but we're driven by the hungers because they give us certain qualities of pleasure. But the needs are where we get satisfied, and they keep us alive and in our tribe. When our needs are put at risk, when we feel our lives are in danger, any of our needs can trigger a high intensity reaction. They have the possibility. Our nervous system and our memories may have an experience from our childhood, from the way our culture perceives it, from wherever our environment, maybe it's from my collective traumatic memory. There is a reactivity because our human being as social creatures are designed to react, to perceive any of these needs as a possibility that we will not survive. It puts both our physical aliveness and our safety on high alert and activation. And this is helpful because it is a source of our capacity. Once we understand this, we can begin to look for it, and we can begin first by looking at ourselves. Sort of that, like I said, it's a heuristic model. It's a self-reflective. The model is designed to begin by looking at ourselves because we're looking at the protective brain. We're looking at the protective animal in us all. And as Janina Fisher describes, trauma is a fragmentation of the self in which different parts hold different aspects of experience. Pain, shame, fear, rage, helplessness. Again, I draw your attention to the physical, to the expression of these people and how our bodies both respond to seeing somebody who's collapsed, to seeing somebody who's frozen in fear, to see somebody who's angry about to punch, to see somebody who's running. In the same way, and this is sort of a taste of where I'm going to be going in this, is that these emotions land on certain hungers in a really intriguing way that can help us develop a feelingful inquiry where we begin to ask, well, what is the emotion you're feeling, if you can name it? And what is it asking of you? What is your emotion trying to say? And is it really